Hey everyone, welcome to our latest Trade to Black podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Shad Dales. In our latest podcast, we continue our series of state markets and the potential they present for producers, financial lenders, and retail operations. 2 weeks ago, we showcased the state of Pennsylvania, and today we're diving into the growth state of Virginia. It's leaning towards going live with adult use cannabis early next year. So what's the potential? Let's welcome in our two co-hosts, the Anthonys. Let's welcome in TDR co-host Anthony Varell. Good to see you.
Good to see you. How's it going?
I am good as well. We bring in the other Anthony, CEO of NewLake Capital, which trades on the OTC under the ticker symbol NLCP. Anthony Coniglio, good to see you again. How are things?
Things are great. How are you guys doing?
Trying to keep busy, but I don't think that's hard in the cannabis space. A lot of stuff going on. I know it's kind of the waiting period as far as the markets are seeing a lot of red lately, but regardless, a lot of catalyst moments on the horizon. But we got some great feedback from the podcast that we did a couple weeks ago pertaining to this new state market series that we're trying to do. We did Pennsylvania, and like I said off the top today, the growth state, Virginia. We're going to dive into that. So let's get right into it and talk about Virginia. We highlighted in our last state market podcast, Anthony, that your company was part of over $100 million of leaseback transactions in Pennsylvania. And now, as I said, with Virginia, this is a state that you see strong growth potential, knowing that adult use appears to be going live early next year. So let's begin with the first topic, the actual bill itself, HB 698 and SB 448. That would legalize and regulate the retail side of adult use cannabis. So where does, I guess, this Virginia final approval currently sit right now?
Yeah, so both houses in the state of Virginia have passed identical bills, and it's now delivered to the governor. So it's going to sit on Governor Youngkin's desk, and that's what everybody's waiting for, to see what he's going to do.
Okay, so with that, as of late February 2024, lawmakers in Virginia have given final approval to a proposal that would legislate retail marijuana sales in the state beginning May 1, 2025, and now it's headed to Governor Youngkin's desk. So do you believe, this is indeed timeline-wise that this will take place and go live early next year?
I do. I do think it gets done this time. However, I think it's going to sit on his desk for a while. I do expect it to come law, but not with his signature. As we understand the statute in the state of Virginia, there are 4 possible outcomes at this point now that it's on the governor's desk. He has 7 days, since the legislature is still in session, he has 7 days to consider this legislation. He could either A, approve it, which I don't think he's going to do. B, he could veto it and send it back and get an override from the legislature, which I don't think there's enough votes to override his veto. 3, he could send it back to the legislature with some recommendations. They could add his recommendations and then it becomes law. I don't see him doing that. Or 4, what he could do is he could just do nothing. And if he does nothing and doesn't veto it, doesn't send it back, well, after 7 days, it actually becomes law in the state of Virginia. I think that's going to be the path he wants to take. I don't think he wants his fingerprints on it, but I don't think he wants to get in the way of the will of the people.
So there is a chance here that we actually hear the word veto coming from Youngkin's desk into this bill, which isn't going to mean that he's going to squash it. It means that he's just going to prolong the process and give himself time to get this thing right.
Yeah, that would be that third option where he sends it back. He doesn't necessarily veto it. He says, here are my recommendations, which pretty much means I'll approve it if you do this. So he could send it back, and then we're going to have more work to do in the legislature.
Right.
But I think the legislature's worked on this for so long. I'm somewhat optimistic that he'll just sit back and do nothing on his side and let it become law without it having his actual fingerprints on it.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it'd be kind of nice to get this done after we went through the compromise last week, got these 2 bills amalgamated, and now it's basically in his court. I mean, this just adds to the fun of the cannabis industry, where now, from a legislative standpoint, we all need to learn all the common law of each state as it relates to how they actually pass bills, whether it's Florida, Virginia, Pennsylvania. It just gets more fun by the day. But I mean, I guess there's 3 main license holders in the state of Virginia, which I thought was kind of light compared to other states. But I mean, I guess it's good for the ones that are there, more so being Jushi, the Cannabis, who actually has 2 licenses, and then GTI in the state. I mean, so as far as, I guess, the uniqueness of this in terms of the MSO occupancy, For someone like you, when you're looking at these markets, does the extreme limited nature of the current medical market, does that make it more investable for you? Or does it kind of make it hard to diligence and really understand what's going to go on if and when adult use is implemented?
Yeah, we certainly like, and we always talk about focusing on limited license states.
Yeah.
And I'd also use the word restrictive. I think limited license is great, but making sure that the market isn't too restrictive. So as an example, Texas, I would say Texas is not only very limited license, but it's also very, very restrictive. So it's not a very deep market there. Here, I think Virginia is a good balance of being a limited license state, but not being too restrictive. And quite frankly, it's hard to get data since in 2022, the state abandoned the need for patients to register with the state. There is no state tracking system for sales right now. They're trying to implement one now in 2024. So a lot of what we do is trying to piece together, what do we think is happening in the 24 licensed dispensaries, where I think only about 21 are operational today. So we think it's a good state, and we think it has some great promise, but it's hard to put a lot of data there. And we like it because of that limited licensed orientation.
Yep. And I mean, as part of, go ahead, Chad.
I was going to say, why do you think they chose to I guess, kibosh the data and all that? Like, that seems unusual for something that, a lot of states would want to track a lot of that information. But do you have any insight that pertains to that?
Yeah, I have to think back to the legislature that implemented some of those changes. It was more of a Republican-controlled legislature. And so there could have been, and I certainly don't know, so this is pure speculation, there could have been this perspective that if we want to have an open market environment and we want it to grow, we shouldn't require patients to have to register. We shouldn't require the doctors making the recommendations to have to register and be a nanny state. It's generally a theme. So perhaps that was part of it, but I don't know the exact reason why. Nonetheless, it's just making it more difficult for those that are outside the state to really understand the numbers in there.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Do you see, I know that the licensing is actually going to open up to a degree with this adult use bill being passed. I mean, that would give the MSOs, I would assuming that are currently there, probably a year head start on anybody else coming to compete in terms of, I guess, retail as well as cultivation. I mean, do you see this as like a hot market where you're going to see MSOs go get those licenses and begin to operate once adult use kicks in?
Yeah, I think so. Again, hard to know exactly what the scope of the state is or could be because of the lack of data. I do think it's an attractive state for folks, particularly given the lack of dispensaries. 24 dispensaries for a state with 8.7 million people is not enough. And just to draw a comparison, if you look at Illinois, that has 12.8 million people, there's almost 200 dispensaries. So think about that. You have 30% smaller population in Virginia, but 85% less dispensaries. So they need more dispensaries in Virginia, and you need more canopy as well. So I think it would be an attractive entry point for any MSO that was able to get their hands on a license.
Got it. Yeah, and I know it kind of breaks down as follows. Like, I know GTI has 6 retail locations. Currently, Jushi has 6, and the Cannabis actually has 12 licenses. 10 are operating and 2 are in development, with I think one of the 2 that are in development coming online here pretty soon. One of the things in the new bill would be that they would only be allowed to co-locate 5 adult use dispensaries within the medical dispensary footprint that they currently have. I mean, I thought this was interesting when I first learned about it in New York. I mean, is there anything that you've seen as per why they roll out the policies like this and not just allow these operators to flip the dispensaries from med to rec, which would make common sense?
Yeah. So again, not being in the room, we can't know exactly sure. But what we've heard from other markets is the legislators want to make sure that the medical program has product available for the medical patients, and that all of the product doesn't flow through to an adult use program. And they find that all of the medical needs for the patients currently in the program are not available, are not met because all the product goes to adult use customers. So that's why they'll want to make sure that there's still medical dispensaries around. Now, the co-location, right, allowing them to co-locate, I think, is a nod to the concept of wanting to get the adult use program up and running before an illicit program can really take hold out in the open the way it has in New York. Because being able to take some floor space and allocate sales between adult use and medical is a lot easier than having to go out to locate a new spot, to build out that spot, populate it with product. It's going to take longer for players to get set up that way. So I think it's actually a smart move for the state to allow the operators to co-locate and launch that adult use program, but maintain medical access for patients.
Yeah. When we, if we take a step back, we've seen the numbers out of Maryland. We've seen the numbers out of Ohio. We look at this as yet another growth state. What does this market potential, look like if we do get adult use passed at some point next year?
Yeah, we think it's going to be a good market. Again, difficult with the limited data. Our estimation is that the medical market is penetrating somewhere between 2 and 3% when you look at some of the data that comes out of the MSOs and what we're hearing from BDSA and others. And Pablo Zuanich, as an example, has done some work around Virginia. So we call it 2 to 3% penetration, which means there's room for this market to really grow within the state. But the added opportunity is the out-of-state sales. And the fact that they have North Carolina to its southern border as an opportunity. There's significant population centers within a reasonable drive to Virginia. And so I think what you'll see is a decent amount of out of state sales. Now, the regulators don't want to necessarily talk about that. I think the unknown is going to be the Northern Virginia population. You have about 25% of Virginia's population is located in the north, which is near Maryland. And what we know from the Maryland market, which is much more saturated with dispensaries and product, is that the price point is much lower in Maryland today than it is in Virginia. And so you may see some of the Northern Virginian population going across the border to Maryland to purchase at a more deeply discounted pace. And so it's going to be interesting to see, how does it play out? Can Northern Virginia really hold its own, or what it loses to Maryland can be more than made up from out-of-state sales to North Carolina?
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the more I looked into it, I mean, I think they've had home grow that's been allowed since 2020 or 2021 in the state, which kind of blew my mind. And it seems to be that like that and the gifting is actually utilized by a lot of the population. Do you think you see an uptick in that with adult use, or it kind of just starts to taper out as people will be able to get easier access that maybe don't want to enter into the medical program within the state?
Yeah, I think the home grow is always a sub category. There's always people that are interested in it and want to grow it at home. But at the end of the day, the mass market isn't going to want to grow it at home. They're going to go out and they're going to look for curated product at a dispensary, is my opinion. In terms of the gifting, I think the gifting is really something where and it speaks to the limited number of quote unquote registered patients. I think it's people who are purchasing and then gifting it to a family or friend. Basically, they're buying it for somebody they know. I don't think that's really going to continue, particularly in an adult use environment. It doesn't really continue on as being necessary. I think it becomes obsolete by and large.
Got it. I mean, one thing kind of just popped into my head off topic from Virginia, but I mean, you mentioned North Carolina, and I mean, cross-border sales. Yeah. Like, obviously, you guys dive deep into the markets before you go into them, forecast them, and really start to get a look at what's going to happen from, I guess, a supply and demand perspective. Are there any numbers that you've actually looked at to what normalization looks like, with the assumption that every state goes online for adult use from like a market perspective?
It's an upward sloping chart, because what we expect is, and what we did was we looked to the West Coast markets, the more mature markets, and what you end up seeing is you see this rapid adoption by cannabis enthusiasts, the people who are maybe moving their purchase activity from the illicit market to the legal channel, and then buying more perhaps as prices come down. It's another interesting dynamic in the dispensary environment. As prices come down with greater dispensary competition, you actually see more unit sales. We've seen that play out in Michigan and Massachusetts over the last 18 months, as just two examples. And so you see that initial pickup as the enthusiasts are buying more and moving into the legal channel. And then you continue to see further growth as you get more mass adoption at the unit level, as you're bringing in that marginal consumer, or the kind of curious, as they're called. And so it's a number that continues to go upward and to the right.
Okay.
Important to share too that Raleigh, North Carolina, I think it's actually one of the fastest growing cities currently right now in the U.S. Is it not?
My wife is currently trying to move there. So yes, it's growing very quickly.
Hopefully with you.
Yeah. Yes. With me as part of the package. But she would love to get out of South Florida, and North Carolina is number one on her list.
You think you'd leave South Florida?
I wouldn't. I don't want to, but no, probably
No.
not.
That was a delayed no, right?
But trust me, I know a lot of people that are moving out of Florida or New York or California or Chicago, and a lot of them are heading to North Carolina.
Yeah.
And it is booming. I've been looking at that market, waiting for that market to come online from a medical standpoint.
Yeah.
To see how it shapes up.
Big tech market, right? And
huge. And finance.
Yeah.
Capital One and a couple other, actually that's Charlotte.
Charlotte.
Not RDU, but yeah, there's a lot of big companies there.
How far is Raleigh, North Carolina from the Virginia border?
I think it's pretty close. Actually.
I think it's within an hour.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's relatively close.
So to your point, that actually would make sense if and when it does go live for a lot of people from that state flowing into Virginia, right, Anthony?
Oh yeah.
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 I think when we look at the medical market, do we have an idea, and this may be an question for you, Anthony Burrell, how many registered medical patients there are currently right now within the market? Do you have that number?
I think currently, the last thing I read, the penetration rate was somewhere around 0.05%. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but I was reading 2 studies this morning, and that seems low. The one thing that I did realize, and Anthony mimicked this as well, was actually drilling into the data in Virginia. It was very opaque. There wasn't as much robust data, like for instance, what you got out of Florida with the OMMU, patient count, flower count, THC count. I mean, Virginia stuff was very black box as far as data and analytics go around the market.
So next up, I wanted to ask.
Yeah,
I know
in 2022 is when.
Go ahead, Anthony.
In 2022 is when the state abolished the need for patients to register, and so that's why I think the patient count is very, very low. When you look at estimates, I think Pablo's estimated over $200 million in sales in the state. I've seen Cannabis in one of their investor presentations estimated it was $140 million market. When you look at BDSA data or other data, it comes in generally around the $200 million market. So not a lot of data, but we estimate, as I said earlier, 2 to 3% penetration on an 8.7 million person population. And that would come out to roughly a $260 million market if the medical patient averaged about $100 spend a month. In some states it's higher, some it's lower.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not a bad number, all things considered. You'd be averaging like 10 million per door. If you were to average them all out from a retail perspective.
Yep.
That would be,
and not all 24 open. You only have 21 doors.
So
yeah, that's right. It'd be easy to model at least.
You focus on limited license states. This is definitely at the top of the list, I would think. You touched on the cannabis, Jushi. You look at this industry 3 years from now. Like, I know we kind of like danced a little bit around how the potential it could bring, but when we look at specific companies that are in specific states, maybe elaborate a little bit on what this opportunity, and it's really a question for both of you, that it presents for a company like Jushi or the cannabis. And I'll begin with you, Anthony Coniglio.
Yeah, I think this is exactly that conversation that the MSOs have when they talk about the opportunity for turn on, to activate adult use and to be able to get growth in their portfolio, drive margin expansion, leverage the existing infrastructure that they have, and look for CapEx to expand. I mean, this is it, whether it's Virginia or Ohio. We've seen it activate in Maryland and in New Jersey. But it's just a phrase that people say on an earnings call, or maybe they type into Twitter. But looking at these state by state dynamics, you can really see where the sales growth comes from and where the opportunity is to expand. And then from a competitive perspective, I'll come back in a moment if you want to talk about the competitive perspective and some of the licenses that Virginia is looking to give out, those micro licenses. I'm just fairly negative that a lot of those ever get off the ground. And so I think the incumbents are going to have a pretty good runway ahead for them.
Yeah.
I feel like those micro licenses, I actually rolled my eyes this morning when I read about the micro licenses and the social equity component, because I was like, it's the same stuff that you're seeing in New York. It's the same stuff that you're seeing in other markets. That doesn't work. It's this market is, the cannabis, I was talking to Jesse this morning. and he was very emphatic and very excited around Virginia. Virginia is, I think it's going to be a big growth driver for them. I mean, they've got, like I said, 12 licenses, 10 active with 2 in development. So, I mean, they've got pole position. If this market booms and it grows, it becomes a growth engine for them in a meaningful way.
Did he shed any light, like meaning conversations he's had with state officials from Virginia and what they've learned on maybe some of the things not to do from New York? No.
I didn't ask him about anything of firsthand accounts with state officials or anything from a regulatory nature. I kind of just wanted to get his sentiment around the footprint and what it looks like and kind of the utilization rate from medical perspective. And I mean, they're in, like I said, they're in pole position. They're in the quadrants of the state that you want to be in. I think they're heavily concentrated in that northern quadrant of Virginia, where most of the population resides. And I mean, it's poised to grow if Youngkin does the right thing and gets this done.
Yeah. Well, we talk a lot about a catalyst moments that this industry, like, adult use won't be on the ballot in Florida. We talk about Ohio. We talk about the numbers in the first 7-8 months in Maryland, and these growth states seem to be a hot topic of conversation amongst investors that really want to look at some of these growth states and growth companies. So with that said, like, where, if you're an investor, you're looking at the space, and this is not investment advice, what are key trends that you think that people really need to watch closely pertaining to this Virginia market that may help them understand, like, as far as the market itself and the business model for these specific companies a little bit better? Like, what comes to mind?
Yeah, I think it's their ability to get doors open to the extent that they aren't, because you already have the infrastructure. You have to be vertical in Virginia. And so you already have the cultivation capacity. So how are they pushing on the cultivation capacity? Do they have enough capacity to keep up with the demand? Because if you think about co-locating, you could turn on adult use pretty darn quick by co-locating, right? You have all the apparatus, employees, and capabilities in place. And so you want to make sure that there's enough demand. And so investors may see, when they're looking at a company's balance sheet, they may see some inventory build ahead of an activation on adult use. It's the same thing we've seen in all the other states that have turned on. And so if you're seeing that inventory build and you're seeing them get the doors open that they don't yet have open, then they'll be ready to take advantage of the adult use and drive margins up.
What comes to mind for you, Anthony? I mean, I mimic that. It's getting doors open. It's getting doors open, but while also keeping your CapEx light, which the colo will allow them to do that. And it's maintaining that margin, maintaining the pricing power, and really hitting the ground running when the market flips to adult use, which it seems like all the license holders that are currently there are in the position to do so. Yeah. Bull prediction time. If we have this conversation 2 years from now, what do you think we say about the Virginia market? Anthony, I'll begin with you. Put you on the spot.
I would say it's booming. I think it's going to be a really good market. I think that the regulators have shown, and the way this legislation has come together, I think they've avoided many of the pitfalls. Is it perfect? No, it's absolutely not perfect, but they've avoided many of the pitfalls, and they seem genuinely interested in having a healthy program. So I think it's teed up to have good success. Great. Well, appreciate the time, gents. Leave some comments below. What you think of the take that we have for the state of Virginia as well? What's the next state that you want us to cover? Leave your comments below. As usual, like, subscribe, and share this video with your network as we continue this series of individual state markets, as we venture off across the country and learn more to give you the information that you want. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks, everybody. Hey everyone, so how are you surviving these tough market conditions right now? Are there any emerging industries that you want us to cover? Any guests that you want us to interview? Then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to source out. As usual, share this video with your network, smash that like and notification bell, and as usual, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel, because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.